world sees the miracle of your nothingness turned into something. Amen. Stop worrying about how you look to others. Focus on the task at hand. Start with just a mustard seed of faith, and you can remove mountains of despair from the lives of our neighbors, our friends, and our families. Even though everyone else might seem more sophisticated, more learned, more lovable and loved, more knowledgeable, more wise, don't worry about it. Every believer is endowed with spiritual gifts sufficient to the task to which they have been assigned. Amen. Ellen White, in her book Education, page 267, says, "The specific place appointed us in life is determined by our capabilities. Not all reach the same development or do with equal efficiency the same work." She further says, in Christ's Object Lessons, page 328, "It is the absence of the Spirit that makes the gospel ministry so powerless. Talent, eloquence, every natural or acquired endowment may be possessed, but without the presence of the Spirit of God, no heart will be touched, no sinner won to Christ. On the other hand, if the gifts of the Spirit are theirs, the poorest and most ignorant of his disciples will have a power that will tell upon hearts. So bring your widow's mite, your mustard seed of faith, and God will multiply it. Watch for opportunities to let your light shine. Be ready at all times, under all circumstances, to give a reason for the hope that is within you." Sometimes when we think of service, we think of handing out literature or visiting nursing homes or visiting remote parts of Africa. These are worthy endeavors, but sometimes the most urgent mission field is right there in our homes, and we pass by every day without noticing the glaring need. The central element of the gospel of Christ is love, and it is the distinguishing mark of Christians. In John chapter 13, verse 35, Jesus said that by this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love for one another. A major deterrent in letting our light shine is our misconception of what it is that we have to offer the world. Doctrine and church traditions are good and necessary. Preaching is a noble gift, but if you cannot preach like Peter, and you cannot pray like Paul, you can tell the love of Jesus. You can say that he died for all. But even more, if you cannot say anything, you can live a life of loving service. And you know the old saying, action speaks louder than words. The greatest sermon that the world can ever see is a life of love and service. Such a life is a city set on a hill that cannot be hid. Such a life is a lamp on a lampstand that gives light to all that are in the house. Jesus said that the world would be able to recognize us by the love that we have for each other. The quality of our human relationships reflects the quality of our relationship with God. A rabbi once asked his students, "How can we determine the hour of dawn when the night ends and the day begins?" One student suggested, "Is it when we distinguish between a dog and a sheep in the distance?" "No," the rabbi answered. "Is it when you can distinguish between a fig tree and a grapevine?" asked the second student. "No," the rabbi responded again. "Please tell us the answer then," urged the students. Said the wise teacher, "It is when you have enough light to look human beings in the face and recognize them as your brothers and sisters. Amen. Until then, the darkness is still with us." One of the biggest obstacles to our proper stewardship of God's gift of love is our selfish inability to esteem others above ourselves. God saw our helplessness and the inadequacy of other means of revealing himself to us, so he sent his Son into this world to be the embodiment of himself, who is love. The people walked in darkness, and they saw a great light. Yet sometimes, even though we once walked in darkness and have been shown that great light, sometimes we're tempted to return to darkness. We can't afford to live as the rest of the world does. Worldly philosophy is in conflict with the Spirit of God. Today, God is calling us out from darkness into his marvelous light. So long as we harbor hatred and discontent among us, we are not walking in the light. If we are not walking in the light, then we are unable to be a light to the world, even as the moon is unable to give light if it is not reflecting the light of the sun. As human beings, we tend to be self-reliant. As children of God, we cannot allow ourselves to be self-reliant. We must lean completely on Jesus. we must not be wise in our own eyes. God doesn't have to love us. He would be just fine without us. He has chosen to love us. If we would be like him, we must choose to love each other. Love is the very essence of the gospel. We speak and sing of amazing grace, but do we understand where that places us in relation to each other? If while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, what right do we have to demand certain behaviors before we will love one another? Why do we think that as light bearers to the world, it is okay to leave our families and our spouses because they didn't behave the way we want them to? What irreconcilable difference can you have with someone that you promised to love for life when we who have sinned against the God of the universe have been reconciled to God by his grace? When God loved us, it was with the full knowledge that we would mess up again. When we married our spouses, we knew, or should have known, that we were committing to life with an imperfect person. The vows that we took were not to love each other when the other person behaves perfectly. Perfection has nothing to do with our commitment of love to our spouse, our children, our parents, or friends. Love supersedes perfection. Love supersedes expectation or desires. Love is eternal, for God is eternal, and God is love. If that which you first called love is no longer love, then it follows that it must not have been love at all in the first place. Love cannot die, because God is love, and he is eternal. Love doesn't die. We simply allow selfishness to block the light, and we choose to continue in darkness, even though the light is breaking through. Dawn comes when we are able to look another human being in the eye and see a brother or a sister rather than an enemy. This can only occur when we see Jesus. We can only see Jesus when we allow him to wash our eyes with eye salve and take away from us the stony heart that allows us to be indifferent to our brothers and sisters. In any relationship gone bad, we know that there is hope when strong emotions such as love or hate continue to exist. It gets really bad when love or hate is replaced with indifference. You remember in Revelation where Jesus said to the Laodicean church, "I wish that you were either hot or cold." When strong emotion exists, there is still emotional connection. When we get to the place of indifference, it's pretty much all over. I pray God that nobody sitting here today in their relationship with God has reached the point of indifference. The hour is late. I shudder to think of how easily we can allow ourselves to be distracted from our mission as Christ's ambassadors here on earth. Even those of us who have consciously yielded our wills, our bodies, our minds, and our spirits to God, we can still become so easily distracted. We must never forget our human state. In an unguarded moment, in a moment of physical fatigue or emotional depletion, we can allow any event, person, or feeling to derail our long-standing relationship with God. How imperative it is that we remain continuously in communion with God. Just when we think we're standing strong, our humanity pokes out from the armor that we wear so loosely. It only takes a moment and we've lost our way. God is gracious. He stands ready to catch us every time we slip. He will not let us fall if we have truly committed ourselves to him. He is faithful. Salvation takes on a whole new meaning for his children who struggle daily to fulfill his will and purpose. It is no sacrifice, though, to give up our hatred and indifference towards each other. For the weight that we carry is far too heavy to bear, if you will admit it. Hence comes all the sickness of the mind that permeates our body in the form of physical ailments. Jesus bids us to come to him, for we are heavy laden with the burden of hatred, malice, and indifference. We comfort ourselves that we are justified in our behavior because we have been seriously wronged. We even delude ourselves that it's okay to protect our interests